So I've been doing a lot of scouting lately, and so I've been spending a little more time on the road, listening to a few more podcasts, and I thought it might be a cool YouTube video to look at my top five public land Midwest podcasts of what I've learned the most from, what I listen to on a regular basis because of what that brand is putting out. So let's make a YouTube video. So to get things started, I wanted to break it down as far as I took a look at a lot of different podcasts, and I listened to a bunch of hunting podcasts in general, but to look at, say, the top five Midwest public land oriented podcasts, I really enjoy, say, like Next Level Deer Talk. I like, buck stories. I'm always looking for like little takeaways that then I can apply to my own hunting. I think hunting podcast host takes an important factor in all this, because I like somebody who's well spoken, who's got good energy, but I also think they have to be a good deer hunter. I think when you have a hunting podcast host that has done some good things, they can pull more from their guests just because they have similar experiences and stuff like that. Like if you look at just hunting topics, I would be a terrible podcast host on food plots because I've done like one in my life. But a podcast I think I could do really well on is off-season scouting, because I've done a lot of that. So I can ask, a guest a lot of questions, get a lot out from them. Now, I also wanted to say this is Midwest focused. There are a lot of Southern podcasts that hunt public land, that hunt mobily, that have a lot of good things going on. And if I was south of Tennessee, I think this list would look totally different. So, I've got a list, and then I've got a top five, and I've got cliff notes. I actually reached out to my top five list to get episode numbers for you guys to kind of steer you in a couple download questions. But without further ado, let's just get started in my general list. And getting things started would be the Nine Finger Chronicles Dan Johnson. I like Dan as far as he hunts mobily. He's hunted out of state. He's done it for a while. Like, he's done bow hunting at a higher level than your average weekend warrior for a while. He's killed some good bucks. He hunts in a really good area of Iowa, which is cool. I think he's got some cool stories there. He's hunted out of state. I'm not sure if I already mentioned that. And, Dan has on guys that are doing it at a high level, and they kind of break bucks down. And I feel like he has a lot of public land guys on. The Hunting Public. Clearly the name says it all. I really like what they do. I think some episodes are better than others. I'm not, one episode that sticks out with me was Zach Farrenball breaking down their gun drives, and just the level of detail and commitment that they did with that was something really cool. Something I think it kind of lacks a little bit is, the hunting public guys, they don't have a day job. So there are other pieces of information for a guy who has a day job and a family that wants to be an elevated hunter. I feel like there's other resources that might be a touch better. Okay, this podcast, it's a newer podcast, and I think in a year this could be top 3, maybe even top 1. And it's the Hunt for Real podcast with Tony Peterson. I think Peterson's his last name. But anyways, Tony has been on Wired to Hunt and has like episodes from Wired to Hunt that like I've listened to over and over because I thought they were so good. And now he's got his own podcast called Hunt for Real. And, Tony is really cool about hunting multiple states. He's an outdoor writer, so he can hunt a lot. So that does lead to a lot more experiences, a lot more talking points. And, Spencer Newhart refers to Tony as probably one of the best public land DIY whitetail hunters probably out there. So that's a pretty, I don't know, I've heard that, and that's a pretty cool accolade there. So definitely check him out. Newer podcast. Moving on, the Deer Hunter podcast. I think Kevin does a good job asking evolving type questions when he has a guest on. In 2018, he hunted a lot of northern woods, Michigan, and so like a lot of the content was very focused on his quest to kill a good buck up there. And I like when he has on Michigan big buck killers, because if you can get it done in Michigan, even if you're constantly killing a top level 2.5-year-old in Michigan, like you're doing something. You can by all means go to another state and get it done. So check that out. Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness podcast with Jason Samkoviak. This one was very tough not to put in my top 5. Jason's a great dude. And where I think Jason shines as far as, why you should check it out is when he talks about some of these extras to the public land aspect. He does a lot of gear review from like boots and like camping equipment or like wall tents. Just a lot of other things that are really cool. Jason spends a lot of time, hunting. Like when Jason talks, you can tell he's a legit guy getting after it, doing it with traditional equipment. Covers a wide variety of topics. Some are just life lessons. One of his recent podcasts I really liked was like talking about do an activity, when time allows, even if it's like for a shorter, span. So like instead of doing a snowmobiling trip that you've penciled on the calendar for a week in February when it could be raining the whole week, he said he used to, this is pre-family life, but they would like see the forecast, gonna dump snow Thursday, Friday. Him and a buddy would drive overnight Friday into Saturday, snowmobile hard for 2 days, only miss a day of work and come back, and they would have more fun in those little short windows because they made the most out of those things. So check his podcast out. Another podcast here on the list would be the Fall Podcast. Aaron himself doesn't hunt a lot of public land, but his co-host does, so they have a pretty good perspective there. Aaron also geeks out on small parcel stuff, which I think a lot of public land guys probably split some time, and so like there's always a lot to be gained there. Aaron has on guys doing it at a high level that maybe aren't as well known, and so there's always takeaways. Very professional as far as what he gets from his guests. And he spends a lot of time in hunting in general because he is an outdoor producer, so he's got a lot of field time. Okay, moving on. East meets West. Very tough to leave out of my top 5. And in fact, if Bo was probably located in a Midwestern state, he would be in my top 5. But obviously, he's kind of penciled into his Pennsylvania stuff, which is important. And I have a lot of takeaways because there's a lot of similarities to hunting, say, the big woods. But Bo, when he talks, he comes across really good as far as a guy that is legit scouting, is legit hunting hard, is legit mobile hunting. Sometimes I have heard podcast hosts kind of talk outside their wheelhouse, outside their comfort zone and not necessarily own the fact that they're such new to something, or maybe they don't do something the guest does, but they try and fake it, whether Bo's podcast, love the big woods approach, love the second level details. He doesn't necessarily have on a bunch of big names, but he's got guys that are killing deer in Pennsylvania, which is a tough state to get it done. And then he has some Western stuff, and he has Western experience, which I think adds to kind of the public land aspect that you can apply, across the Midwest. And the last podcast before we get in the top 5 is a newer podcast, shameless self-plug, the Whitetail Experience. We got a podcast. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, go check us out. But, when I look at the Whitetail Experience podcast, it's just a branch of what we do from a video perspective. It's very in our lane. We're not going to drift off and talk about food plots. We're not going to talk about turkey hunting for a whole episode because that's not what I want to do. And it's going to be mobile hunting, public land, guys getting it done, real world experience, juggling life. So that's, I don't think we've been doing it in a long time. So but I definitely wanted to throw our name in the hat there. So let's get started with my top 5. And like with my top 5, I think there's a lot of similarities among the brands and outlets here. And a lot of these podcasts have stuff that I've taken to the field, have made me a better hunter, or I have takeaways that are going to make me more effective, more efficient. Exodus Outdoor Gear makes my top 5 list. They're very focused, very professional podcast. They talk deer hunting. Look at Chad hunts a mix of public land from Ohio, big woods, swamps, and some private stuff. Grew up hunting private. Jake, is killing really good deer in Illinois. So, you have 2 different states. Jake can hunt small parcels. I'm not sure what kind of mix of farms he's hunting, but he's getting it done. And Jake talks about he has the goal to kill a booner. And so he's a very motivated guy. I think he works hard at his craft. They own a trail camera company. They're going to have a lot of data, a lot of cameras, a lot of customer cameras. So, to look at that collection of data is pretty cool. And obviously they speak a lot about trail cams on their podcast, but it's also, beyond that. They have a lot of public land guys on. They have a lot of like high caliber guys where they're chasing a single buck. They have big woods guys on there that are looking for just a good one to come through a pinch, But it's all sorts of high caliber deer talk. Really like that podcast. Episodes they kind of wanted to steer people to is 66, 61, 98, 91, and a personal favorite of mine, which I don't know the number, is a Jeff Sturgis one where they talk about hunting the big woods. So definitely check that out. Number 4, Whitetail Legacy Podcast. Really like these guys. 2 guys that have families, that have work, and they love to deer hunt. They've killed some good deer, and I killed a stud 2 years ago. But they also spend about 40% of their time now hunting public. And I think Cody has talked about he used to hunt a lot of public, and then he kind of went away, and now he's coming back. And so they'll talk gear, they'll mobile hunt. Their direction is pretty cool. I like the fact that they're taking like average guys not on TV that are killing really good deer, and that's who they want to talk to. They don't care about talking to the Drurys or the Kiskies, Lee and Tiff. Like that is like their direction, their niche, and that's what they're going for. And I really like it. I listen to their stuff, and even if they're talking like small private land guys, like I'll have some takeaways to apply. So as far as episodes to check out from them, 76, 100, and 132. Moving on, number 3, the Christo series podcast. Obviously, more episodes to come that I think are going to be like really good. But if you look at Andre's hunting experience, he was killing high level caliber bucks before trail cams. And if you took trail cams out of the DeQuisto's arsenal, like I don't think they'd skip a beat. They just, the way they hunt, the scouting being the priority, the in-season scouting being the priority, you can turn and apply that to whatever you're hunting as far as public land. Maybe not necessarily small parcel, that can be a tiptoe game, but if you got some farm and ability to scout a bit, I really think this is a podcast to key in on. And I think they're just now starting to scratch the surface. But a cool concept that Cody and I talk a lot about is, so I'm looking, let's call it a 130 on public. There's not a lot of those in Ohio. Cody's looking for a booner on a private farm, and there's not necessarily many of those either. So both guys are looking for a deer that's not around every tree. And so like there's, despite the huge gap in inches, there's still a lot to take away and apply. Check out episode number 9 and number 5 from them. Number 2, this guy actually climbed up the list, I feel like, this year. I feel like he found his direction, and that's Truth from the Stand. In 2019, I feel like he found his niche, he found his target, and it's kind of the DIY crowd, or the... I just think he's found his focus, and he hunts public land. He hunts a little bit of family farm, and he's talked a little bit about some land management stuff. But he's killed 2 public land bucks, Iowa and Ohio, and still hunts public in PA as well. And good buddies with bow hunting fiend Chad Sylvester. He's got a lot of infield experience, as far as he takes some of these rut trips. So there's takeaways there for a guy wanting to do the rut trip. He's gone west a few times as a guy who lives in the east, and so some of that gear, some of that experience gets into these podcasts. And is it something to take away and add to your arsenal and what you've got going on? I think he's got a pretty cool project on his hands right now that I think the public land guys can maybe follow or whatever. But he's got he bought a utility trailer for a cheaper price than, say, buying a camper, and he's going to put some time, energy, and effort into this thing, money as well, but and kind of convert it into like a rut wagon, I think is what he's calling it. So I'm actually very interested to see how that goes. Essentially creating something to hunt out of for your little, probably 3 to 10 day hunt trips, for public land whitetails. As far as episodes to check out, go ahead and look at episode 171, 165, 162, 74, 77, and 63. Moving on to number 1, obviously, it comes as no surprise, Wired to Hunt. Single-handedly, hands down, I have learned the most from this podcast. it's changed a lot of how I hunted, I think. You know, Mark is a professional. He's done this for a long time. He has really good interview skills. He gets a lot out of his guests. Mark hunts both public land in Michigan and the Midwest, but also goes to the western side of the states, has hunted public land in Iowa. And true, Mark does this for a living, but he also gets a lot of field experience that way. And so I think that helps him. You know, I think Mark's chased a single buck, you know, a couple times. Mark's killed a couple slammers in Michigan. You got to be doing something right. Yes, you have the time, but, you know, I think there's something to be said there. Obviously, anytime he has on Andy May, I think it's a good one. He obviously has had some other public land guys. Oh, and some of his earlier stuff is just as good and worth a re-listen, I feel. I reached out to him. He said, check out episode 222. It's like a public land master's class. Well, guys, if I've missed your podcast, if I maybe need to check out a podcast, leave a comment, get a hold of me. I'm always open for good podcasts. I just thought this would be a cool little list to combine and consolidate. Thanks for watching.